Welcome to Oto TV, the out of the office investigation from the past into the future of personal health and actualization. This time we're investigating dengue, Zika, chikungunya, and mosquito-borne illness. I'm your host, Alex, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Benita. So Benita, for years, most of us here in California have kind of thought of these diseases as, something you only worry about when you're packing for a tropical vacation. But that whole picture has changed, hasn't it? It's like the ground has shifted right under our feet. These aren't far-off threats anymore. They are right here, and they're posing a very real public health challenge, not just for California, but for our neighbors in Baja California and Baja California Sur, too.
Alex, you've hit the nail on the head. And to really kick things off, let's just start with one single number. 18. Now, when you first see it, it seems so small, right? Almost insignificant. I mean, in a state with millions and millions of people, what could the number 18 possibly mean? But for the public health folks who've been watching this whole situation evolve, this number is a massive, blaring red alarm. It means a line we hoped we'd never cross has been crossed.
And here's exactly what it means. 18 is not the number of people who brought dengue back from a trip abroad. That number is actually way higher. No, this is 18 people who got bitten by an infected mosquito and came down with dengue fever right here, at home, in California. This is the definitive proof that the entire transmission cycle, from an infected person to a local mosquito, which then bites and infects another local person, is now officially happening within our state's borders. It's the tipping point we've been trying to avoid for over a decade.
Exactly, Benita. And you can just feel the weight of that moment in this statement from Stephen Obsher, the president of the Mosquito and Vector Control Association of California. When he says locally acquired dengue, now a reality, that is not just some line in a press release. That statement is the result of years of prevention efforts suddenly shifting into a new, much more serious phase. It means we're moving from just prevention to active containment. And for every single one of us, that's a huge call to action.
Okay, so that really sets the stage for what we're looking at today. This is not just about a handful of cases, it's about a whole new reality for public health in our region. We've got to understand what these diseases are, how they even got here, and what it all means. But Alex, I have to play devil's advocate for just a second. You hear 18 cases in a state of nearly 40 million people, and it is pretty easy to think, come on, is this really a crisis, or is this maybe a bit of an overreaction?
That is the absolute perfect question to ask, Benita. And to answer it, let's put it in perspective. Let's look at a mosquito-borne illness we're all a lot more familiar with. West Nile virus. It's been a known threat here for decades. We've had more than 8,000 cases since 2003, and in some years, that means hundreds of cases and, tragically, dozens of deaths. It's a serious, persistent problem. But, and this is the crucial difference, West Nile is spread by our native Culex mosquitoes. Dengue, Zika, and chikungunya, they're spread by a brand new, invasive mosquito that has totally different habits. So while 18 seems like a small number now, it's really the opening shot from a completely new kind of enemy. We're in chapter 1 of a whole new story.
And that new story features 3 main villains, dengue, Zika, and chikungunya. They're all what scientists call arboviruses, which is really just a short way of saying arthropod-borne viruses. In plain English, they're viruses that are transmitted by insects. And what's so concerning here is that all 3 are carried by the exact same type of invasive mosquito. That means an area that has these mosquitoes could, at least in theory, face outbreaks of all 3 diseases at the same time, which, as you can imagine, is a nightmare scenario for any public health system.
And this table, Benita, it just illustrates the huge challenge for doctors on the front lines. I mean, just imagine you're a doctor at an urgent care clinic. Someone walks in with a really high fever, a nasty rash, and they're just aching all over. Is it dengue? Is it chikungunya? Is it Zika? Just look at how much the symptoms overlap. They all cause a fever, they all can give you a rash, they all bring on serious muscle and joint pain. The differences are really subtle. Chikungunya is famous for its ridiculously severe joint pain. That's what the 4+ signs are for. Zika is a bit more likely to come with conjunctivitis, red, itchy eyes. And dengue is the one that sometimes, not always, can lead to bleeding. So for doctors trying to figure it out quickly, it's a real puzzle. And that puzzle is exactly why you can't just rely on symptoms. You absolutely need specific lab tests to know for sure. In the first few days of the illness, there's a molecular test called RT-PCR that can actually find the virus's genetic code. A little later, after your body's had time to build a defense, other tests can pick up on the antibodies your immune system has created.
And getting that diagnosis right isn't just about giving the patient an answer. It is absolutely critical for public health officials who are trying to track where these viruses are and just how fast they're moving through the community.
Okay, let's get into the unique dangers of each of these because they each have their own scary signature move. For dengue, it's a terrifying complication known as severe dengue. And what makes it so sneaky, so psychologically cruel, is that the real danger kicks in after the fever is gone. The patient starts to feel better, they think they're on the mend, and then, a day or two later, their blood vessels can suddenly start to leak. Plasma floods out, blood pressure crashes, and it can spiral into shock, internal bleeding, and organ failure. It's a life-threatening emergency that shows up just when you thought you were out of the woods.
Chikungunya's calling card is different, Alex. It's usually not deadly, but its long-term impact can be absolutely life-altering. For a huge percentage of patients, the initial sickness is just the beginning. They go on to develop what's called post-chikungunya chronic arthritis. And we are not talking about a few minor aches and pains. This is debilitating, excruciating joint pain that can go on for months, or in some studies, for 6 to 8 years. Just think about the economic impact of that. One study estimated the indirect costs, lost wages, lost productivity, at over $47 billion globally in a decade. It's a disease that can literally steal years of a person's life. You're listening to Odo TV with research by author Paul Bulow. And then, of course, you have Zika. Now, for most adults, it's a pretty mild illness, but it became a global public health emergency for one absolutely heartbreaking reason: what it does during pregnancy. If a pregnant woman gets infected, the virus can actually cross the placenta and attack the developing fetus. This can cause a whole range of devastating birth defects known as congenital Zika syndrome. The most infamous of these is microcephaly, where a baby is born with a tragically small head and an underdeveloped brain, which leads to lifelong disabilities. The discovery of that link back in 2015 created a wave of panic around the world and really showed us the unique and terrible danger of this particular virus. So we've met the viruses, Benita, but how are they actually getting around? Well, that brings us to the real engine of this story, the vector, the carrier. To really understand this new threat in California and Baja California, we have to get to know the mosquito that's responsible for all this. It's time to meet our new and very unwelcome neighbors. This comparison right here gets to the absolute heart of the problem. For decades, we've been dealing with our native Culex mosquitoes, the ones that carry West Nile. They're annoying for sure, but they mostly bite at dawn and dusk. We kind of know their playbook. But these invasive Aedes mosquitoes, they play by a completely different set of rules. They are aggressive day biters. And that changes everything. It means you're at risk when you're out gardening at noon, when your kids are playing in the backyard in the afternoon, or when you're just at a barbecue. They also love to live right alongside us, and they can breed in an incredibly tiny amount of water. I mean, a bottle cap's worth is plenty. They are perfectly, almost terrifyingly adapted to our suburban lives. And they are absolute masters of expansion, Alex. This number, 24, is the number of counties in California where these invasive Aedes mosquitoes are now officially considered established. This isn't just a Southern California thing anymore. They are a permanent fixture of the ecosystem across a huge part of our state, from the border with Baja California all the way up through the Central Valley. They're here, and they're here to stay. So how on earth did a tropical mosquito become a California problem? Well, it's really a perfect storm of three huge global trends. First, you've got urbanization. More people packed into cities means more people for mosquitoes to bite, and way more man-made containers for them to lay eggs in. Second, global travel and trade. An infected person can hop on a plane in a country where dengue is common and land at LAX just hours later. Mosquito eggs can literally hitch a ride in shipments of things like old tires. The constant movement of people and goods across the U.S.-Mexico border also creates a kind of natural highway for both the virus and the mosquito. And finally, there's climate change. Warmer temperatures, especially at night, are letting these mosquitoes survive and thrive in places that used to be too cold for them. Now, Benita, we get to what is probably the most fascinating and, frankly, the most frightening piece of science in this whole story. It's this phenomenon that's especially pronounced with dengue, and it explains why a second dengue infection can be so much more dangerous than the first. It's this bizarre, dangerous biological trap where your own immune system, your body's greatest defense, is tricked into becoming the virus's best friend. The process is called antibody-dependent enhancement, or ADE, and it really is like a biological Trojan horse. Here's how it plays out. Step 1, you get infected with dengue. Let's say it's type 1. Your immune system does its job perfectly. It creates these powerful, specific antibodies. You fight it off, you recover, everything's good. But then, months or even years later, you get bitten again. But this time, the mosquito is carrying a different strain, dengue virus type 2. Here's where the fatal flaw comes in.
Those old antibodies from the first infection, they recognize the new virus and they latch onto it. But because it's a different strain, it's not a perfect match. They can't neutralize it. Instead, they act like a treacherous guide, essentially giving the virus a VIP pass to invade your immune cells with incredible ease. They help the virus get into the very cells that are supposed to destroy it. The result? A way, way higher viral load, which triggers a massive overreaction from your immune system, a cytokine storm that causes the leaky blood vessels and shock of severe dengue. And this is not some obscure scientific theory, Alex. The Mayo Clinic states it as a plain and simple clinical fact. If you've had dengue before, you are at higher risk. This is what makes dengue so incredibly difficult to manage in places where multiple strains are circulating, which is the case in much of Latin America and Asia. And this whole phenomenon, ADE, is the single biggest reason that developing a safe and effective dengue vaccine has been such a massive challenge for scientists. You have to create a vaccine that protects against all 4 types at once, because if you don't, you run the risk of actually making people more vulnerable. It's a truly wild and dangerous feature of this virus.
So, we've covered global trends, complex immunology, and these spreading threats. It's really easy to feel a little overwhelmed by it all. But here's the most crucial point we want to make today. The most effective way to fight these diseases starts with incredibly simple actions right where we live. This whole public health battle is fought, quite literally, in our own backyards. You're listening to Odo TV with research by author Paul Bulow.
And this right here, this is the enemy's recruitment center. The invasive Aedes mosquito doesn't need a swamp or a pond. All it needs is any little container that can hold a bit of standing water for about a week. We're talking about the saucer under your flower pot, the water that pools in an old tire or in the folds of a tarp, a kid's toy left out in the rain, a clogged gutter, even your pet's water dish if you don't change it out every day or so. Every single one of those can become a nursery producing hundreds of new, aggressive, day-biting mosquitoes.
The solution, then, is a really simple weekly routine. Just think of it as your backyard patrol. It only takes a few minutes. First, tip over anything you can that's holding water. Buckets, wheelbarrows, watering cans, whatever. Second, toss out any junk you don't need that's just sitting around collecting water. Old pots, cans, just clutter. If you don't need it, get rid of it. Third, drain the water from things you can't tip or toss, like a bird bath or those plant saucers. And finally, protect yourself. When you go outside, especially during the day, make sure you're wearing an effective repellent. It's a simple, powerful mantra. Kip, toss, drain, and protect. And on that point of protection, let's be super specific, because not all repellents are the same. You really need to use products that are registered with the EPA and have one of these key active ingredients. We're talking about DEET, picaridin, oil of lemon eucalyptus, or IR3535. These are the ones that have been proven in studies to actually work against the Aedes mosquitoes that carry these diseases. Read the label, follow the directions, and make sure you reapply it, especially if you're sweating or you're out for a long time. So the most crucial point is this. While our vector control agencies are doing amazing work on a large scale, they just can't be in every single backyard. This fight truly comes down to individual and community action. The mosquito that bites you was most likely born in your yard or your neighbor's yard. So eliminating those tiny little breeding sources, yard by yard, house by house, is the single most powerful thing we can do to protect our communities. It's a shared responsibility, 100%. And that brings us to our final thought for today. The arrival of these diseases in California, their spread in the Baja region, this isn't just some random fluke. It's a direct symptom of much larger shifts happening on our planet, a warming climate, and a world that's more connected than ever. And it forces us to ask a really important question. As our environment continues to change, what other invisible threats, what other viruses and vectors are just waiting in the wings to expand their range and emerge next? The story of dengue in California is really a profound wake-up call for all of us to stay vigilant, to stay informed, and to stay prepared for the health challenges of our changing world. Thanks so much for joining us on this Odo TV investigation,